Hi everyone, it's William. This is the latest installment of the Grand Duke Dmitri diary series, and I'm hoping this is a long diary entry, although not too long to do it in one session. I'm just hoping we'll make it through because my dogs have been awful today with barking. Apparently there's some activity going on outside, and I'm also expecting Grandpa to come through the door at possibly any minute. I don't know where he's at or when he'll be coming through the door. So, if you're watching this, then it was a success. Okay, so we're up to the 23rd of February, 1921. It's a Wednesday. We're no longer in sync with Dmitri with the days of the week because I wasn't able to fit in a video yesterday. And, of course, we're in Copenhagen at the English Mission. So yesterday we had this interesting dinner at the home of Admiral Richelieu with his overweight wife that Dmitri rather delighted in pointing out. And one thing I forgot to mention yesterday is that Dmitri said that this dinner, the king and queen were there, and this dinner was, according to him, a benefit for the royal couple. So what kind of benefit would they need? Surely was not a benefit to raise money for them, but maybe for one of the charities they were supporting. At least that's what I would guess. So that was the day before, and a good time was had an amazingly good time for Dmitri, and they didn't get home till 4 a.m. So what we didn't know in yesterday's diary entry was that Dmitri made a wager with another person about whether he would be able to get up early enough the next day to pay a social call. Okay, so let's dive in. I got up around 9 o'clock. I got up so early because I had a wager with Wedel that I could come and have coffee with him at 10:30. I did it under the pretext of the wager, but naturally the real reason was to have a chance to see Marie-Louise. The Wedels live at the home of her old parents at Friedrichsholm, Canal 24, quite far away from the English Mission. Wedel was himself rather sleepy. At first we were à deux, and then his wife came with her sisters, Countess Bernstorff and the Countess Fries. Naturally, Marie-Louise was also there, but she was terribly unwell. She had a sore throat and a fever. I left around 12 o'clock, lunched at home, and then went for a drive with Lucia and Charles Murray. Around 4 o'clock, I stopped by Ksenia's to ask her about her mother's condition. The poor empress was still very weak, and once again, I wasn't allowed to see her. For tea, I went to Meta's. It was a more or less philanthropic visit, since Meta had a severe cold and was lying prostrate. The Marlings and I dined that evening at the Wedels, and the minute I arrived, it became clear to me that Marie-Louise was not present and was not going to be present later. This is how the incident happened. After dinner, Countess Fries came up to me and said that Marie-Louise wanted to see me. That immediately struck me as rather strange and implausible, because it wasn't at all likely that a proper young lady would ask me to come into her room while she was in bed. But the temptation was too strong, and I went, taking the Countess Wedel with me for chaperone. I found Countess Moltke in bed and terribly unhappy with my visit, but I hastened to explain that it wasn't my fault. The remaining part of the evening we all spent at the Fries place, where we danced to gramophone music. Overall, it was pretty boring. Okay, interesting day. Twice at the Vadels, and I should have refreshed my memory on the Vadels names and how old. Here we are. I have it. I have it, but it was something that my note was fairly jumbled on. Okay, so there was Count Joachim. I think that in this instance it's Count Joachim Wedel Neergaard, Neergaard. There he goes. Who was 59 and was married to Countess Julie Moltke. He was a diplomat and a chamberlain at court, a big landowner and a respected forester, an expert on the management of forests. Okay, so Dmitri was with the Vadels on the 21st? No, it was the 20th, and had mentioned that, no, he didn't mention it, but I gather from the fact that his wife was born a Moltke that this was probably Marie-Louise's aunt, and hence the connection. So it seems like, so this is all rather confusing because they're staying at this building that belongs to somebody's old parents. I put in her, I shouldn't have done that, her old parents, as in Mrs. Wedel, who was born a Moltke. But I don't know whose old parents it was, because this house on Friedrichsholm Canal 24, this building, it's no longer a house, it's a school. I found it online, and who it belonged to between 1984 and 1927 was a count, a family. It had been purchased by a count named Mogens Fries. I think Mogens is probably pronounced Mons. Mons Fries, a Danish count. It had been bought by him in 1894. And as two buildings, so there was the main house, and there was also an annex, a mansion that was connected to the main house. And so, yeah, in 1927, it was sold for the Johann Borup Folk High School, which I gather is a high school for continuing education for adults. And there's a picture of it online, so I posted that. If any of you don't know about my Grand Duke Dmitri Diaries Facebook page, then you can see it there. That's where I posted it. Huge building. Anyway, it belonged to the parents of one of these individuals, either Count Wedel or his wife, or her sisters, Countess Bernsdorf or Countess Fries. And again, I'm confused because I found a Countess Bernsdorf who was the wife of a Count Bernsdorf, who was a Danish-German diplomat, and she looked about the right age. There are some beautiful photographs of her at the National Gallery in London, or the National Portrait Gallery, and you can see those online. But she couldn't possibly have been Wedel's wife's sister, who was born a Moltke, because she was born, she was an American. I can't remember her last name, but it certainly wasn't Moltke. She was an American from New York. And then there was Countess Fries. And so I do not know if Dmitri is correct in saying that this is that these are Countess Wedel's sisters. He sometimes does get things like that mixed up. Maybe, well, it couldn't be sisters-in-law either. I don't know. I really don't know. Anyway, so he went under the pretext of this wager, but he's telling us that he really wanted to see Marie-Louise, and apparently he did see her, even though she was feeling quite unwell. She came down for coffee, apparently, even though she was feverish and had a sore throat. All right, Wedel, Dmitri tells us, was himself rather sleepy, but both men had to get out of bed in time for this wager. Okay, so then what? Then he leaves around 12 o'clock, has lunch at home at the English Mission, goes for a drive with the Marlings, and at around 4 o'clock goes by the palace to see Ksenia and ask about her mother, which he could have done on the telephone, of course, but that was nice of him to stop by. And he seems to actually want to go in and see the Dowager Empress, but this is the third time that he's been told that she's simply too weak. And yeah, anyway, we'll see if he gets to see her before he leaves Copenhagen. He doesn't say anything about how Ksenia was. Duke! Go outside. Okay, wow, that actually worked momentarily. Okay, so for tea, he goes to see Olga's wife. And he calls it a philanthropic visit because she was also in bed. She was lying prostrate with a severe cold, and I don't know if Dmitri should be doing this. Apparently there's a pretty bad flu or something going around in Copenhagen, and people are really quite sick, but he's going to visit them. Okay, good for him, I guess, but it's a little foolhardy. So I never know if it's Meta or Meta, M-E-T-A. She is, she's Olga's morganatic wife, and the reason why Olga is no longer in the line of succession in the Danish royal family. And she and Meta, Olga and Meta would remain married after Olga joined the French Foreign Legion. In the next year, in 1922, he would join the French Foreign Legion, and they had a little boy, and they would stay married, and she would go apparently and visit him occasionally in Morocco, which is where he was posted with the Foreign Legion. But, I don't know if domestic trouble was any part of the reason why he joined the Foreign Legion. According to him, it was just because he'd always wanted to do that. Okay, and then it's back to the Wedels and this interesting incident. So Mrs. or Countess Fries is being a little naughty, isn't she? She's luring him into Marie-Louise's bedroom under the pretext that Marie-Louise herself had requested this visit, and Dmitri knows better. He tells us from the start that he realizes that this is, he calls it strange and implausible for a proper young lady. It wasn't at all likely for a proper young lady to invite him into her room while she herself is in bed. But he puts it to us very clearly, and for some reason writes in English. But the temptation was too strong, and I went, taking the Countess Wedel with me for chaperone. So apparently the Countess Fries had just said, oh, go upstairs because Marie-Louise wants to see you. And she wasn't going to go with Dmitri, but Dmitri was, he was savvy enough to know that this was a setup and to ask his hostess, Countess Wedel, to go up with him. And she apparently also believed that Marie-Louise wanted to see him. So she went, and Marie-Louise was not happy about this. She was terribly unhappy, Dmitri says. So he found himself in the position of having to tell her that he had been set up, that it was not his fault, although kind of. He knew he really shouldn't do it. But it was okay, I guess, because of the presence of Countess Wedel. It's interesting for me as a sort of language person to see that he, in his English writing, calls her the Countess Wedel. So ordinarily in English, I think a person would say just Countess Wedel, and then if you were not using her surname, you would say the Countess, taking the Countess with me for chaperone, but he uses the Countess Wedel. Russians very often have quite a hard time with articles because the Russian language doesn't have articles. And then he says for chaperone instead of for a chaperone. So again, the trouble with articles, there's a missing articles, even though he was a more or less fluent English speaker and had been speaking English since childhood. It's still the case that Russian was his native language, and his English was not that of a native speaker. So there's that trouble with articles. And it's interesting that instead of calling her either Marie-Louise or Marie-Louise Moltke, this time he's being more formal. I found Countess Moltke in bed and terribly unhappy with my visit. Okay, and then he says that they spent the evening at the Freeze place. So I wonder if they started out they started out in one of the two attached buildings and then migrated to the other. And once Marie-Louise is out of the picture, Dmitri finds the whole thing boring. They dance to gramophone music, but without Marie-Louise, it's just boring. So, okay, that's that one. We have a short one for tomorrow. A fairly quiet day, although there will be another social occasion. He's really packing them in, getting lots of invitations, and that's good, I guess. All right, so I hope to see you then. Take care. Bye.